Hi, this is Jim Ledoux with Vibrant Faith, and I'm delighted that you are part of the Growing Generosity, the Growing a Generous Church initiative that includes a training as well as a 5-session cohort. And my hope is that in this process, you get clarity about how do you create a congregational culture that celebrates the goodness of God, celebrates your assets and what's present, and celebrates people's willingness and desire to give generously and joyfully. So we want to highlight just a couple things that are really pretty important as we move forward. And first of all, this idea that what is the message that we continuously convey to our members? Do we tell the story of transformation and impact? Are people clear about what our primary purpose or mission is and how we're continuing to live that out each and every day? And that our transformation multiplies because of the gifts and the callings and the resources and the finances that people have to help bring about this ongoing transformation, both within the congregation and beyond the church's walls. So we want to take a close look as to what do we consistently say, what do we consistently do that actually creates a culture of vibrant faith, a culture of vitality, in particular, a culture of generosity. So, and in this journey, we'll help you actually create a generosity scorecard. How do we actually measure what generosity looks like? How do we make sure that we're on track, where we're continuing to grow, a culture of generosity in that process? And in addition, we'll also pay attention to your different funding streams. Most every church has, ordinary stewardship, just the consistent weekly or giving or monthly patterns, both in person or online giving. But this is kind of the year-round stewardship opportunities for people to be generous. But then we'll also take a look at those extraordinary stewardship opportunities. That's like capital campaigns or a special appeal that you might have once or twice a year. How do we lift those up and give people the opportunity to give generously towards things that they're particularly passionate about? And then there's also legacy stewardship. We don't go as deep in that area, but for those that want to continue to make a difference after their death, how do we provide opportunities for them to fund and create memorials that support ongoing ministry or perhaps some new initiatives? But we'll pay attention to those kind of 3 areas: ordinary stewardship, extraordinary or special appeal type of stewardships, and legacy stewardship. And a couple things that we want you to know just as we get launched into this process is just there's critical practices that really need to be embedded into your congregation if you're going to have a culture of vibrant faith and vitality and generosity. So here's some leadership practices to start with. First of all, we know that pastors have to be comfortable talking about money, talking about giving. They have to model stewardship for their congregation. But pastors have to be on board and willing to talk about it. Also, your primary leaders, your elected leaders, your program staff need to begin that journey of generosity and inviting others to do the same. And again, we need leaders, not only just your elected leaders, not just your program staff, but do you have other leaders serving in a variety of ministry settings that are willing and comfortable to talk about the gift of financial generosity and how that continues to fund important and impactful ministry? We also know, and this will affect you if you're watching this video, is that we know that stewardship teams or generosity teams are really important. And we need to make sure that they're well formed. There's a sense of clarity about what your purpose is, that each person on the team has their kind of personal responsibilities and contributions to help create this culture of generosity. And also that the stewardship or generosity team works closely with your elected leaders and pastors and program staff, that there's a synergy and collaborative spirit in that process. In addition, we don't just assume that leaders automatically know everything they should know about stewardship. None of us ever get to that point. But do we have a plan for equipping and empowering people to have a better understanding, appreciation, and the capacity to invite other people into a journey of generosity? So we need leaders that are trained and educated in all facets of holistic, whole life stewardship. And then finally, a critical leadership practice that we have high expectations for members and for leaders and ministry partners, that they would give generously. We made a good case for why they should be generous in their giving. But we should really raise the bar, and so often our bar is pretty low. So those are the leadership practices. And then I just want to lift up one last element, and that is the education process that supports generosity. We need to be willing to preach and teach about stewardship on a regular basis. We need to be able to talk about the role of money in a person's life and share testimonies about how they use it as part of their capacity to be good stewards of everything that God has given us. We need to teach people personal money management and how they can, again, save and serve and bless and give. How do we help people manage their money well? We need to be able to articulate that money is an expression of our faith, just as serving our time and sharing our wisdom and our talents. We need to also lift up and encourage people to talk about first fruits giving, proportionate giving, and growing in giving in that capacity. We also want to make sure that we're inviting all people, young and old, into stewardship conversations. And again, we want to lift up stewardship not just as something that's finances, but it's how we care for our body, how we care for God's creation, how we manage our time, how do we manage our gifts and our callings in life. So we want to teach and emphasize all of life stewardship in this process. And then we also want to have a calendar where we know what we're seeking to emphasize. What are those messages about stewardship and a life of generosity that we want to consistently talk about, emphasize, celebrate each and every month? And we should also have a schedule for when there will be those giving opportunities and when those giving and impact stories will be shared with the congregation during worship, at all church functions, on your social media sites. Where else might it show up that we're continuously inviting people to give? We're thanking them for their generosity, and we're telling those stories of impact. So that's a little bit of where we will go with this process with the cohort. And we'll first of all look at kind of what's the lay of the land? What's our current reality? Where do we have a ministry or financial generosity scorecard right now? What are our typical messages that we share with the congregation as a whole about what we believe and value and embrace about a life of stewardship? So we'll talk a little bit of just what your current reality is. And then we'll invite you to think about how do we create a clearer sense of purpose around God's mission, and what are those messages we need to can articulate in ways that people understand and that are repeated in so many different ways. But we need to become a storytelling church about God's goodness, about God's grace, about our giftedness, about our assets, and how that's transforming our communities. So I want you to think about how we tell the stories of transformation, the stories of impact, and the stories of people's generosity. So we need a story piece. We need to have a good foundation for how we understand whole life stewardship. Then we also need a calendar that's going to help shape this process. And we know every single month what we need to be talking about, lifting up, celebrating in that process. And we also need to have a good, strong team, a generosity or stewardship team that guides us along this way. And then we'll finally spend a little time talking about annual campaigns and what are those specific logistics for these certain special appeals throughout the year. But that's where we want you to end up, that you have a strong foundation and understanding of faith formation, that you have a well-formed team, that you've articulated your key messages and how you're going to share those stories with your congregation. And you're going to have a roadmap or a calendar that's going to guide you through each one of those steps, month by month by month. So that's where we'll go with this. And so I'm excited about you being part of this process. And I hope that you'll take advantage of some one-on-one coaching sessions in addition to what we do as a cohort. Because our goal is that you become that generous church. And individually, that you are challenged to grow in what a journey of generosity looks like for you personally. Be well.